My name is Sherilyn Jordan. I've been a community organizer around queer and trans migration with Legit and Rainbow Refugee for over 12 years now. I'm also an assistant professor in counseling psychology at Simon Fraser University, and my work looks at how to support the mental health of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered or queer people. We often think of gender as one thing, but I'm going to suggest we tease it apart a little bit. So when a human being is born, they're assigned a sex at birth, and that's typically male or female. But that doesn't reflect kind of the range and complexity in terms of people's bodies or in terms of people's kind of felt sense of their gender and who they are. Okay? So we have sex assigned at birth, male or female is how we've organized it. But then people will also have kind of a felt sense of their own gender. Gender is something that we are socialized into. We're not born with a gender. Okay? We learn or are taught or are socialized into how to be or do girl or be or do boy, and then there are ranges and variations around that. And so gender identity is people's sort of felt sense of kind of the combination of masculinity or femininity that they live. And then gender presentation is how people express that through their actions, through dress. There's lots of ways that we bring our gender out into the world. Okay? And so we have people's sort of sex assigned at birth, people's felt sense of their gender identity, and then how people present their gender out in the world. Okay? For some people, those things kind of neatly align. Yeah? Well, I was assigned the sex female at birth. My gender identity is, I'm pretty comfortable calling myself a woman, and the way I present is more or less pretty consistent with that. So I don't get SIR'd very often. So in this way, I kind of live in a fairly gender conforming way. Yeah? In North America and more broadly now, we use the term LGBTQ, the acronym LGBTQ, as a shorthand for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. This is an acronym that tries to encompass kind of the range and variety of sexualities and genders that exist. But like any acronym, it falls short. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is that LGBTQ, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, refer to identity, stories, and experiences and categories that have developed here in North America or in the West that may or may not fit or align with the experiences of people who've come into their sexualities or genders in other countries, cultures, and languages. Yeah. Both our sexuality and our gender are very much socially constructed. Yeah. The way we make meaning of our sexualities or genders is something that can only happen in and through our relationships with others and through language. And so each culture develops their own ways of understanding sexualities and genders. So sexual and gender diversity is universal. It exists, historically, across cultures. What is particular or distinct is to North America or to Western Anglo culture is organizing around lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender identities. And these identities have a, kind of a story and a history and a culture that for newcomers may be familiar and feel like a place of affinity and connection, or may not. And I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as well. So the notion of Canada as a safe haven for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people is a pretty powerful story. And I think it's also one that is a little bit dangerous, and I'll talk about why. On the one hand, yes, there's reason to be proud of the legal rights that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people have worked for, and also to be proud of the ways that there is, a level of social safety. On the other hand, this does not translate into everyday safety and acceptance for queer and trans newcomers. So what I have seen through my work is that sort of day-to-day, walking in neighborhoods, finding safe housing, getting a job, building sort of friends and community are all complicated by sort of the exclusions of racism, anti-immigrant or anti-newcomer, homophobia or heterosexism, and transphobia. We've had people who have made it here, safely, and then within 1 week have experienced verbal and physical assaults on the street. That combination of being both racialized and queer or trans can kind of amplify ways that people then become at greater risk of being targeted for harassment or violence. One of the issues that comes up is that all of our community services and are organized around the assumption that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people are citizens or people with status. And our community organizations that are here to support newcomers are generally organized around the idea that people are straight, or the assumption that people are straight. And so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered newcomers are trying to navigate a social support system that barely acknowledges their existence. There's community organizations that have been working to kind of address this, but they're very much small, unfunded or underfunded organizations. And so the safety network that is there is pretty sparse. And so, it's exciting to me to have organizations now working to make those connections and collaborations that will then kind of fill in the safety net so that people don't have to kind of check who they are at the door when they come in seeking help for things like housing, mental health supports, job seeking. And so I'm hoping that we get to a place where we have settlement workers who are very comfortable talking about things like, when you go for this job interview, how do you want to handle questions about family? Or being able to host conversations with new immigrants about, how are you feeling in your workplace? Is this a place where do you feel supported by your boss in terms of your sexuality? Have you been able to have a conversation with your boss? Do you feel like you need to? All of those things are things that, I'd like to see settlement workers get to a place where they're comfortable having those kinds of conversations, just like I'd like to see some of the community organizations that we have that, focus on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks be places that are more open to understanding of the situation of newcomers, that have done some work around addressing racism in their own organization, that have done some work around, how can we recognize that people have different migration statuses and what it means to ask for support or help when you're not fully in status or when you're seeking status. Important to remember that people who have come as refugees, to escape homophobic or transphobic persecution are survivors in lots of senses. And so they've learned to sort of cover or hide, but they've also learned ways of kind of reaching out, finding hidden resources, finding the one person in their community who could support them, and these are all strengths that can be built on as well. And so alongside that sort of sense of really strong internalized surveillance or stigma and challenges around kind of building trust relationships, people also have some amazing resourcefulness and resiliencies that can be tapped into.